Liberal Viewer present.
So, welcome to Liberal Viewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 34 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really good show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. No official political comedy this week, still a couple weeks until Bill Maher returns to HBO on August 7th for official political comedy, so we'll have to settle for the Trump campaign for our comedy, I guess, as I'll show in a minute, but you can see all the topics I'm covering listed down in the video description, and if you're watching this as a recorded show, you should see time indexes down there to skip to the topics that most interest you. After the 2000 political campaign clips, I'll have a few clips on the gun issue and some other issues from the recent shooting in Lafayette, Louisiana at a showing of the Amy Schumer movie Trainwreck. I'll have a couple more clips on the issue of race in the light of the latest police-related death, this time Sandra Bland's death in custody in Texas after being arrested for a traffic violation that was caught on video. And speaking of video, I'll have several clips about a right-wing anti-abortion group's secret video recording of Planned Parenthood officials that's been in the news and what it means, if anything. And I'll end with a couple clips on ISIS, Turkey's entry into the war on ISIS, and the ISIS threat against the United States, such as it is. But first, I want to start with the ongoing 2016 presidential campaign, beginning with, as I said, what passes for political comedy for my show this summer. The Summer of Trump, as you'll see it called on CBS eventually. But whether Donald Trump's candidacy is actually a joke is still actually kind of hard to tell. I'll show some polls that put him as the front runner, but when Democratic Representative Keith Ellison tried to take the Donald Trump campaign seriously on the panel on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning, he got a really big laugh, as I'll discuss after you see that clip over here.
I'm watching Keith Ellison over here, just smiling silently through this whole discussion. Democrats loving this.
Well, all I want to say, George,
now, okay?
all I want to say is that anybody, from the Democratic side of the fence who thinks that, who's terrified of the possibility of President Trump, better vote, better get active, better get involved, because this man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket.
Next, I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on.
Sorry to laugh.
Next
Hey,
week,
you know, George, we had Jesse Ventura in Minnesota win the governorship. Nobody thought he was going to win. I'm telling you, stranger things have happened.
Well, and also, George, it's also keep.
And it's true, stranger things have happened. It's hard for me to think of one off the top of my head. He talked about Jesse Ventura, and that was kind of strange. And the Ross Perot phenomenon was kind of strange. And I'll show a comparison of Donald Trump and even Bernie Sanders to Ross Perot in a little bit. But I want to show the next analysis of the Trump effect on the Republican field. This is how different Republicans are dealing with Trump, also from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. This time, their reporter Jonathan Karl talks about how the way Republicans are dealing with Trump is somewhat similar to the different stages of grief, you know, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross different stages of grief that you'll recognize over in this clip.
On the campaign trail in Iowa Saturday, Trump supporters were out in force.
Now you like Trump, is that right? You better believe it.
Donald Trump's surge is putting Republicans through the 5 stages of grief. Some are in denial.
Donald Trump's not going to be the nominee.
Others have moved to anger.
Donald Trump's candidacy is a cancer on conservatism, and it must be clearly diagnosed, excised, and discarded.
While some are bargaining that Trump's appeal will fade after what he said about John McCain.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured.
I'm going to make a bet that you're not going to win the Republican nomination slandering veterans.
But while it may depress some in the GOP, they'll have to accept that for now, the Donald is the GOP frontrunner. The most recent ABC News Washington Post poll shows Trump with the biggest lead by far of any Republican yet. The billionaire businessman, celebrity, and say anything, offend anybody, tell it like it is persona has struck a nerve. Now his standing atop the polls guarantees he'll be center stage at the first GOP debate next week.
I'm inappropriate.
The former reality star could turn that showdown into a spectacle. Just look at how he talks about his fellow Republicans.
Rick Perry should have to have an IQ test before getting on the debate stage.
The last thing we need is another Bush.
Then I watch this idiot Lindsey Graham on television.
He's called you an idiot. He's called you a lightweight. He's called you a stiff.
It's like being at my family reunion.
Perhaps the thing most likely to stop Trump is Trump himself. While his favorability has gone up since May, most Republicans remain skeptical. 56% of them say Trump does not reflect the core values of their party. In the past, he's donated money to Democrats, supported abortion rights, and even praised Hillary Clinton.
I identify with some things as a Democrat.
But the biggest Republican fear is that Trump will decide to run as a third-party candidate, which could guarantee a Clinton victory. Trump certainly isn't ruling it out.
If I'm treated poorly, that's one thing. If I'm treated well and with great respect and don't win, I would not do that. But if I'm treated poorly, I would do it.
For Republicans, that might be the kind of grief that's just too much to bear. For This Week, Jonathan Karl, ABC News.
So it's a pretty good report from Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and he talked about the rocky relationship that many Republicans are having with Donald Trump, and then ended with that whole possibility of him running in a third party instead of being a Republican. And that's kind of the same area, or the same topics that were covered over on CBS's Face the Nation. I'm going to show another 2-minute or so report. This is John Dickerson talking about the rocky relationship that Trump's having with several different candidates, and ending with the possibility of him running in a third party. Although I don't know why they keep talking about that when he's currently the front runner, but here's the CBS analysis in this clip.
Donald Trump and the Republican Party are at a rocky patch in their relationship. How will it end? Let's look at the story so far. Before Donald Trump was a presidential candidate, he was known for his high-profile divorces. He's happily married now. It's his political relationships that are blowing up. First, there was his split from Senator Lindsey Graham, who Trump says once called asking for a favor.
He called me up out of the blue. I never met the guy. Then he wanted to come in for campaign contributions.
Once close enough to give Trump his private cell phone number, Graham has a different view now.
I don't care if he drops out. Stay in the race. Just stop being a jackass.
So Trump gave out Graham's phone number to the world.
I wrote the number down. I don't know if it's the right number. Let's try it.
Now the senator needs a new phone. At least he's being a good sport about the whole thing. Trump was also once fond of Governor Rick Perry.
I think he's going to do very well.
But that was 4 years ago. And now?
He's doing very poorly in the polls. He put glasses on so people will think he's smart.
So Perry got personal too.
Donald Trump's candidacy is a cancer on conservatism, and it must be clearly diagnosed, excised, and discarded.
Next in the receiving line, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. Trump split with him after a Walker fundraiser referred to Trump as dum-dum.
He was up in my office 5 months ago, giving me an award. Give me an award. And I like Scott Walker. He's a nice guy. But today, one of his people hit me. And I said, why is he doing that? The person's a stupid person, but why is he doing that? Hit me. And I said, hey, now the gloves are off.
No one has thrown a lamp yet, but Trump has threatened the equivalent by suggesting he might leave the party and run as an independent.
I do not want to do independent at all. Now, if I'm treated poorly, that's one thing. If I'm treated well and with great respect and don't win, I would not do that.
Turn around here, handsome.
Republicans worry that Trump, the independent candidate, would steal their voters and hand the presidency to a Democrat. So while things have gotten heated with Republicans, they might want to think about sending Trump flowers again.
Thank you.
So that was the CBS clip covering the big raucous Republican primary field with Trump taking up all the oxygen, and that was the more in-depth clip from CBS. But I also wanted to show the quick summary clip at the beginning of CBS's Face the Nation, where they talked about the summer of Trump. I think this includes some polls. I'm not sure. We'll have to see together whether this is the one that includes the polls. But I promised you that someone would call it the summer of Trump. Here's John Dickerson on CBS's Face the Nation calling it the summer of Trump in this clip.
The summer of Trump continues, and he's got a new target among his competitors.
Oh, finally I can attack.
Responding to a remark from a Scott Walker ally, the billionaire unloaded on the Wisconsin governor while campaigning in Iowa yesterday.
The only one beating me in Iowa is Scott Walker, and not by that much. And he grew up, he grew up next door. I mean, he's like right next door. Little advantage, right? Except Wisconsin's doing terribly.
At the top of the polls and turning out big crowds, is Trump a summer fling, or has he tapped into something? We'll hear from two other Republicans fighting for the same voters, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul and former Texas Governor Rick Perry.
And I'll have some clips of Rand Paul and Rick Perry, who were both on multiple shows. I'll have some clips of them in a minute. But one thing that was really important that was in all three of those last clips that I played, all those different clips covering, or the CBS coverage, the ABC coverage, and the NBC coverage, is they talked about the way Trump is now attacking Scott Walker, who was like the only candidate that he hadn't attacked. And I even saw this Slate article a few days back about how maybe Trump was like a stealth candidate for Scott Walker because he was attacking all the other Republicans except Scott Walker. And, well, now that has been broken. Now he's attacking Scott Walker. And one of the big problems for the other Republican candidates is, as you see, in the coverage I've been showing for weeks, Donald Trump is getting almost all the coverage. And so the other Republican candidates are having to do some kind of strange things to try to get coverage, which was the topic of a story over on NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd talking about a few other Republican candidates and what they've done to try to get media attention in the summer of Trump, although that was the CBS phrase over in this clip.
Welcome back. With Donald Trump being, well, Donald Trump, the rest of the field for the Republican nomination is having to contend with a major problem. How to break through when Trump is sucking up media attention like a black hole. Well, let's start with Ted Cruz. He departed from accepted rules of behavior on the Senate floor Friday when he decided to call out his own majority leader, Mitch McConnell, over his position on the Export-Import Bank.
What we just saw today was an absolute demonstration that not only what he told every Republican senator, but what he told the press over and over and over again was a simple lie.
A liar. He called a fellow Republican a liar. Then there's Rand Paul's Kentucky Chainsaw Massacre of the Tax Code, which Paul says he'd like to simplify to just one page. And let's not forget Lindsey Graham, who's been fielding a lot of extra calls after Donald Trump gave out a cell phone number. Graham decided it was time for a new number and a phone upgrade. So, in a way to get some attention, he starred in a video showing some creative ways to destroy his old flip phone.
If all else fails, you can always give your number to the Donald. This is for all the veterans.
We'll be back with our latest.
And I will show an actual clip of Lindsey Graham a little later from a different show talking about that silly phone video he made about destroying his phone after Donald Trump gave out his phone number. And I'll also show Rand Paul talking about his kind of silly video destroying the tax code and the more serious issue of his flat tax. But before I get to any of that, I want to show another clip from NBC's Meet the Press. This is actually the polls that I was promising earlier. I have several clips that have polls, but these are the polls that show that Donald Trump is not only the front runner in a lot of different polls, but even continuing to be the front runner after last week's end of Trump comment, where he was supposedly going to start having big problems in the Republican field with Republican voters because of his attack on John McCain not being a war hero because he was captured, or he said he wasn't a war hero, he said he was a war hero. A lot of Donald Trump's statements are kind of self-contradictory, but anyway, here is a look from NBC's Meet the Press at various different polls, not just about Donald Trump, but all the different tiers of the candidates, and differentiating between Iowa and New Hampshire, and then specifically talking about how the John McCain thing affected him differently with Iowa voters and New Hampshire voters in this clip.
Sure. And the biggest story on the Republican side, no surprise here, as Donald Trump would say, my poll numbers are huge. So let's start in Iowa, where few figured that Trump would be a major player here. But guess what? Right now, Trump has surged into second place, just behind Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker, who edges him out by just 2 points. The only other candidate in double digits is former Florida Governor Jeb Bush with 12%. By the way, as you know, so many candidates, we have 3 tiers we have to cover. So here's the second group of candidates in Iowa, the ones in sort of mid-single digits. Ben Carson and Mike Huckabee lead this tier with 8% and 7% respectively. You can see the rest, including our next guest, John Kasich, rounding out things at 2%. Trailing in the third tier in Iowa are 6 other candidates who poll at 1% or less, including somebody who won the 2012 Iowa caucuses, Rick Santorum. Now, let's move on to New Hampshire, where Trump has surged all the way into the lead. He's sitting at 21%. Again, though, it's the same 3 candidates with double-digit support. Bush is this time in second place with 14%, and Walker is the one in third place. Let's take a look at the second tier of candidates in New Hampshire, though, and look who leads this tier. It's John Kasich. He's got 7%. One thing you may not know about Kasich, he's actually had TV advertising, 2 million of it, that's been spent in New Hampshire. By the way, the bottom of the field in New Hampshire looks a lot like the bottom in Iowa, with the same names at 2% or less. As you can see, we have to use carrots. We have to do less than signs when you have so many candidates there on that front. Sarah Fagan, let me tell you, too, because our polling in both Iowa and New Hampshire was conducted a little bit before the McCain incident. Remember the John McCain, Donald Trump incident? And a little bit after. What's interesting is in Iowa, Trump's numbers actually went up post-incident from, was at 16% before, 18% after. But in New Hampshire, not surprisingly, where McCain is still beloved, before Trump was at 26%. In the half the survey that was conducted after the incident, he went down to 14%. So trashing John McCain is bad politics in a New Hampshire primary still.
So I guess at least in New Hampshire, it looks like there may be some negative effect on Donald Trump from those McCain comments that last week I reported several people giving conventional wisdom that it would be the end of Trump, but it is not really the end of Trump, even though it, had some effect in New Hampshire. But the next clip I want to show is the one I promised of Lindsey Graham talking about how he responded to Donald Trump giving out his cell phone number. And this is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Oh, I'm sorry. Is it This Week with George Stephanopoulos? Yeah, ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. You'll see a little introduction from George Stephanopoulos about how Trump gave out the cell phone number and Lindsey Graham's viral video destroying his cell phone in this clip.
There is Lindsey Graham incinerating his cell phone, putting it in a blender, dropping it off a roof. All that after Donald Trump gave out his phone number on live television, deluged with calls. Lindsey Graham joins us right now. And you have a new phone yet, Senator?
Yes, it's the iPhone. I'm sure Apple's stock will soar, but I've got an iPhone.
And you've never even sent an email before. This will be new for you.
Well, that doesn't mean I have to. Well, let me tell you, I don't know if I'm going to email, but I do have an iPhone. I needed to upgrade. Donald Trump's done something my staff could never get me to do, and that's get a new phone. So thanks, Donald.
Let's.
Now, that's kind of funny, although it's a little bit strange that one of the things I read about this whole controversy is Lindsey Graham actually had one of those flip phones, a non-smartphone, and he memorized phone numbers and never used the phone for email. And I showed a clip several months back that George Stephanopoulos was referring to there, that Lindsey Graham said he didn't even send email. So maybe this will bring Lindsey Graham into the 21st century. And speaking of Lindsey Graham being reasonable, I talked to, I think was it last week or the week before, that you're in trouble when Lindsey Graham is the voice of reason. Well, here's Lindsey Graham saying some very similar things about how Donald Trump represents the dark side of the Republican Party in response to a question from George Stephanopoulos a little later in that same interview this morning on ABC in this clip.
Let's talk about this a minute. We were just talking with the roundtable about the nature of Donald Trump's appeal. You haven't been shy about taking him on at all. You've called him toxic. But the question, I think, for a lot of Republicans, he seems to be tapping into something. How do you take him on without turning off those voters?
Well, number one, I would ask the Republican Party to understand why most major companies are firing Mr. Trump, and I don't think we should hire him. I'm not taking on voters. I'm taking on an idea of that I think he's appealing to the dark side of American politics. He is not offering solutions to hard, complicated problems. He is basically selling fear and prejudice.
Then why is he doing so well?
It's sad to say, but, well, I think there's a market in both parties if you say outrageous things. There's a market in my party for people. If you say that Obama's not born in America, that he's actually born in Kenya, there people want to believe that. If you say most illegal immigrants are drug dealers and rapists, there are people that want to believe that. And he's appealing to fear and prejudice. And there's a market for that. If you said Bush was a war criminal or he's stupid, there's a market for that on the other side. So what Mr. Trump is offering is not really good for the party or the country, but unfortunately, there's a market for this.
In fact, you said...
And I think what Lindsey Graham said there is definitely true. There is a market for fear and ignorance in the Republican Party. I don't know why he's just figuring this out now, or maybe he isn't, but Donald Trump is not the first person to show that there's a big market for fear and ignorance in the Republican Party, and I think he draws kind of a false equivalency to the Democratic Party, where, I mean, there definitely are some, dark sides of the left, but I don't think it's as nasty as some of the dark sides of the right in terms of anti-immigrant and racist and all that kind of stuff that Lindsey Graham was referring to. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But I also want to show something that isn't getting that great a market in the Republican Party, and that's the ideas of Senator Rand Paul on taxes. I showed earlier how he had this viral video, I don't know how many views it actually got, trying to destroy the U.S. tax code to promote his flat tax to get a little media attention in the summer of Trump. And I'm going to show John Dickerson follow up with Senator Rand Paul on that idea. And I don't know, maybe this is too boring. You can tell me, is this too boring after all the excitement of the Donald Trump buffoonery? Here's Rand Paul trying to explain his serious flat tax proposal in this clip.
I'll talk to you about tax policy. You put out a video last week that got some notice and attention. In that video, you had a wood chipper, you had a chainsaw, you were destroying the tax code. You would like a flat tax. One of the things about tax policy in Washington is every lobbyist has their fingers in it, and that's why you want a flat tax. But how do you get to a flat tax in a city that's overrun with lobbyists messing around in the tax code?
Well, you've got that right. The city is overrun with lobbyists, and they don't want a flat tax. They want to manipulate the system to help their customers. I want to get rid of the whole tax code, and I think that the 70,000-page tax code we have is chasing American jobs and chasing American companies overseas. Burger King reincorporated in Canada. Canada's business tax is half ours. So I think what you do is get rid of all the favoritism, get rid of all the cronyism, and let's have one single rate, 14.5 for business, 14.5 for individuals. And the one thing we do that's different than any other flat tax, we get rid of the payroll tax. So if you're a worker and you make $40,000 a year, you're going to get $2,000 more in your paycheck with my flat tax.
Now, I noticed that Senator Rand Paul kind of dodged the question that John Dickerson started that clip with, where he asked how you're going to get it past all the special interests who have a big stake in the current tax system. And he just said, well, it's because of all those special interests that we have to change the tax system, but never really said how he's going to get past all those special interests that have such a hold on Washington, D.C. I don't know whether you think the flat tax is a good idea or a bad idea. I think it actually ends up being not very progressive. But I want to get back to the summer of Trump and some of the problems with Donald Trump. This is over from NBC's Meet the Press. This is a clip of Chuck Todd talking to Ohio Governor John Kasich, and you can see John Kasich really dodges the whole Donald Trump issue. I thought the way that Chuck Todd asked him the question was kind of interesting, because John Kasich used to be a guest host for Bill O'Reilly on the Fox News channel a few years back. I think this is a clip. He takes a quote from 2004 where John Kasich basically pulls a Jerry Seinfeld and says, "What's the deal with Donald Trump?" to his guest, and then John Kasich doesn't take the bait and answer his own question. And then you'll see John Kasich go into his own biography. This is kind of important. I want to show a John Kasich clip because he's supposedly one of the 4 conventional wisdom frontrunners, along with Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and Scott Walker. Donald Trump was never supposed to be a frontrunner, but John Kasich, who just entered the race, the last of the 16, here he is talking about the Trump, or avoiding talking about the Trump phenomenon, and then giving his own biography as his reason for being a good presidential candidate in this clip.
Let me ask a question about Trump that you asked about Trump. This came from, you were subbed for O'Reilly back in 2004.
I did.
Yeah. And here's
I was really good, too, wasn't I?
Well, okay, then. Here's how you asked. You were asking a Celebrity Apprentice contestant this. Your question was this: and what about this fascination with Donald Trump? It doesn't seem to be abating. What the heck is the deal with this? I know we're a big celebrity culture. What's the deal with this guy? That was your question.
That's really good.
Yeah. Answer your own question. What do you make of this?
No, I asked somebody. I don't know. What was their answer? Because I'm not getting into that.
He was larger than life, is what he said. He's just fascinating. What is your,
Chuck?
What is your read on this?
I don't really pay any attention to it.
I understand that. I know you've answered
I don't have a read on it. I'm not talking about him.
The pre-announcement video for you from New Day for America, your super PAC, on July 19th, it went out, and there was a line in here that sort of made me raise my eyebrow. It just describing your bio, and it said, Kasich then worked in the real world as a commentator at Fox and in finance here in Ohio. Do you think most Americans would say,
no,
your experience on Fox?
Yeah, somebody else pointed out, it was a great experience. Yeah, it was the real world.
But this is not what Americans would consider the real world.
Let me tell you what the real world is. Yeah. You get bad ratings, and you're not going to be doing Meet the Press. And when I was at Fox...
There's no doubt.
Okay, so it's part of it. But the real world for me was I had about 5 different jobs. You know, I worked at Lehman Brothers, where I traveled the country meeting with entrepreneurs and business leaders. I served on a few boards. I taught. You know, people don't know this. I taught at 3 universities on a very part-time basis. I was out there, and look, my dad was a mailman, and at McKees Rocks.
A lot of people think that's the real world.
Well, it is. It's a real world. Look, in my mind's eye, it's the people I grew up with, working in the steel mills, working in the chemical plants.
It isn't being a political pundit on Fox.
Well, it's part of the world, but I wouldn't really say that I understand working people. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to see Governor of Ohio John Kasich there admit that it's not really a real world job to be a pundit on Fox News or a guest host on Fox News, but I think it takes a lot of balls there to tout his experience at Lehman Brothers when Lehman Brothers went bankrupt in 2008 and was partially responsible for the big economic meltdown. That doesn't seem to be something I'd be touting on my resume if I were Governor John Kasich, but you can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I notice I have over 100 live viewers at the moment, and I appreciate all of you who have been joining me live. I've been reading your comments while I've been playing the clips, but I want to get through all these clips. I have over an hour's worth of clips, and that means I have to try to talk fast and keep my part of in between the clips to less than an hour to keep the show under 2 hours, hopefully. And now I wasted all that time explaining that to you. But I want to play, I think I have 3 more clips on the Republican side before I start transitioning to several clips on the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race. This is one of former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, who has tried to really get himself a little traction in the Republican race by attacking Donald Trump. Here he is over on CNN's State of the Union, where Jake Tapper points out that a lot of the things that former Governor Rick Perry said when he was governor of Texas about immigrants are very similar to what Donald Trump says about immigrants. And Rick Perry, kind of says it's not really true. It wasn't quite as broad a brush as you'll see in this clip.
You were on this very program in 2014 talking about illegal immigrants. Take a listen.
What we are substantially more concerned about in the state of Texas, and I will suggest to you across this country, are the 80% plus of the individuals who don't get talked about enough that are coming into the United States illegally and committing substantial crimes. Candy, these individuals are responsible for over 3,000 homicides and almost 8,000 sexual assaults.
Governor, you sound an awful lot like Donald Trump in that clip.
Well, there's no doubt that there are some real challenges with the individuals that are coming across the border. But I think, as you heard me talking in I think a very specific way, in a very focused way, and not painting with a broad brush. I wasn't casting aspersion upon the vast majority of the immigrants that come across here.
You gave a speech, as I mentioned earlier, as we played a clip from, calling Donald Trump and Trumpism a cancer on conservatism. He released a photograph of the two of you and said that you're a hypocrite. He called you a hypocrite because you wanted his support in 2012, you wanted his money in 2012. I wanted to give you an opportunity to respond.
I went to a lot of people throughout the years and asked them for their support. Mr. Trump was no different. As he has come forward, as we've got to see the real Donald Trump, I've got some real problems with that. I think that what he is saying and what he is doing is not necessarily moving the cause of conservatism forward. I respect the men and women who are coming to Donald Trump's events. I mean, these are Americans that care about the same things that I care about, but there's only one individual that's going to be standing on that stage that's had the executive experience of dealing with this.
So that's Rick Perry responding to accusations that he's a hypocrite because he said some similar things about immigrants, and also because he wanted Donald Trump's support, and now he's one of the big attackers on Donald Trump. You know, he's one of those candidates in the lower tier trying to get into the top 10 before the August 6th Fox News Republican debate, where there will only be the top 10 candidates on the main stage. And so he's trying to get his way up there by attacking Donald Trump, and I don't know if that'll work or not. But having watched what former Texas Governor Rick Perry said about immigration there, I actually want to show a clip of Donald Trump himself, who phoned in to CNN State of the Union and talked to Jake Tapper. And you'll see Jake Tapper tries to get him to say whether he is for or against a path to citizenship for the 11 million or however many undocumented immigrants are currently in the United States. And what's really interesting about this answer is, despite all of his, inflammatory rhetoric about how bad immigrants are, and you'll hear him talk about how they're bad dudes, we have to get out of the country. That bad dudes is actually what he says, which is kind of funny. But then he doesn't actually say he's against a path to citizenship for the people who are here. I think the most specific he'll get is, we'll see what we'll see, after we, get the border secure and get rid of the bad dudes. He doesn't say whether he'll whether he would rule out a path to citizenship over in this clip.
The other day, assuming a President Trump is able to stop the flow of illegal immigration through building a wall or some parts of a wall, what do you think should be done with the estimated 11 million undocumented workers and their families already here? Would you be open-minded about a path to citizenship? Is that a non-starter with you?
Okay.
Where are you on that issue?
Fine. First of all, you said it. You have to stop it. You have to stop it fast, and we can do that. We can do that with combinations of walls and Border Patrol, who are phenomenal people. I met many of them when I was in Laredo, when I was at the border, and we can stop that, and fencing. But we can stop it with both construction and with physical. We can do a great job of that. Okay, I'm totally convinced, and it won't cost the kind of money. In fact, we'll save money, because people that are coming in here that shouldn't be coming in here illegally, it will actually save money by doing it and doing it properly. Once that's done, we have a situation that is going to be done immediately. Before that's done, we're going to get the bad ones out. We have some really bad dudes right here in this country, and we're getting them out, and we're sending them back to where they came from. And I don't mean Mexico. They come from all over. They're not coming they're coming from all over. We have some real bad ones, and they're in our prisons that we're paying for, and they're walking the streets of San Francisco. What a horrible thing happened to Kate, right. And what a horrible thing happened to Jamil, the young man who was going to maybe go to Stanford and football player and the apple of his father's eye. Well, let me tell you something. We got to get rid of the bad ones are going to get out. Then from that point on, we're going to look very, very strongly at what we do. And I'm going to formulate a plan that I think people are going to be happy with. But we're going to look very, very strongly at what we do.
Okay, but you're not going to rule in or rule out.
I'm going to get rid of the bad ones fast. Okay. And I'm going to send them back, and we're not going to be putting them in prisons here and pay for them for the next 40 years.
But there are obviously,
we're going to send them back where they come from.
There obviously will remain, after you get rid of the bad ones, millions and millions of undocumented workers who are not bad ones, and their women and their children and their men who are here, who came here for a better life, but you're not going to yet take a position on whether or not you would favor a path to citizenship.
We're going to see what we're going to see. I mean, it's a very hard thing. I will say, from a moral standpoint, from a physical standpoint, you're talking about at least 11 million people. You know, I've heard the numbers much higher than that, because that number's been bandied about for years. 11 million, I've been hearing for years. It could be much more. But we're going to take the high ground. We're going to do what's right. Some are going to have to go, and some we're just going to see what happens. It's a very, very big subject and a very complicated subject.
I want to
ask. The wall is going to be built. The security. We're going to have a great border. People can come into the country legally, but not illegally. And the people that come in are going to be good people. They're going to be great people, and I want that. It's a very.
So that's Donald Trump on his greater, more detailed immigration policy, other than his inflammatory, invective rhetoric towards immigrants, Mexicans, and otherwise being rapists and murderers, and what else he said over the criminals. I don't know exactly what he said, but I thought it was interesting that even though he said all those nasty things, he also won't say whether he would rule out a path to citizenship for the undocumented immigrants who are here. And before I leave the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race, I want to show one more clip from Senator Rand Paul. This doesn't have anything to do with Donald Trump, but you may remember over the last year I've shown several clips of Rand Paul trying to move more to the left, or more dovish or less interventionist on foreign policy issues, depending on, some people say it's isolationist. It depends on what word you want to use. And I want to show how he was questioned about this over on Fox News Sunday. Chris Wallace actually said that the world had moved beyond his strategy, that because of ISIS and other threats and shootings, that people were too scared to take on this new Rand Paul non-interventionist strategy. And I want to show Rand Paul saying that that's not true, even in the Republican Party, and then his follow-up about bulk phone record collection and whether NSA spying really makes us safer is actually kind of reasonable. And this is about 3.5 minutes long from Fox News Sunday in this clip.
There is also a sense, in terms of your diminished status, at least in the Republican primary polls, that the world has changed on you. You were running strong in the polls a couple of years ago, even a year ago, when your positions on limits to foreign intervention, limits to domestic surveillance were very popular. But now, with ISIS on the march and with increased domestic terrorism at home, there's a concern that maybe you aren't tough enough on those issues.
I think the interesting thing is we poll these issues and we ask these questions to voters all the time. And there was a poll not too long ago in Iowa, and they asked, do you think we should be more involved in foreign war like John McCain, who wants to be everywhere all the time? Or do you think we should be less involved or more judicious and only go to war when we have a threat to an American interest, a vital American interest, like Rand Paul? And it almost polls equally in Iowa. Same in New Hampshire. Same in Nevada. So I think the party split on some of these things. I do want to defend America, and I will defend against terrorists. In fact, I think I would do a lot more than the others on the stage, because I think they are distracting ourselves from the real terrorist threat by collecting so much information that we get inundated by the information and we get distracted. I want to collect more information on terrorists, but I want to do it according to the way the Fourth Amendment was put forward, that suspicion should be individualized and there should be a warrant with the judge's name on it.
Senator, as you know, Fox News and Facebook are teaming together to put on the first Republican presidential debate on August 6th in Cleveland, and we are asking you, the viewers, to submit questions, either written or videos, that we're going to ask candidates on that stage. Facebook tells us that the top 3 issues among people who talk about you are taxes, intelligence gathering and privacy, and homeland security. And here's a comment From Johnny Anderson on Facebook, who writes, Senator Rand Paul is working overtime to protect homegrown terrorists. Americans are dying. Senator, how do you answer Johnny?
I think it's kind of a misunderstanding of the situation. The interesting thing is we've just had another terrorist shooting in Chattanooga. We had a Boston bombing. We had Major Hassan at Fort Hood. All of these occurred under the mass accumulation of data, the bulk collection of data that President Obama is doing, which has been ruled illegal by the courts and I think contravenes the Fourth Amendment. So we've been having these terrorist attacks despite the collection of all this information. And the interesting thing is when you look at it, I think maybe we're being distracted by too much information. Malcolm Gladwell puts it this way. He says, good decision making isn't about knowledge or data. It's about understanding the data. So I actually want to collect more information about terrorists, but I don't want to indiscriminately collect all Americans' information and invade their privacy. So I think actually what we've been doing, even the government admits we haven't been catching any terrorists with this bulk collection of data. Congress has now said we shouldn't do it. The courts have said we shouldn't do it. And I think it goes against every sense of what the founding fathers put into the Fourth Amendment. So, no, I think my position on privacy is very popular. People under 40, 83% of people under 40 think the government shouldn't be collecting your phone records all the time.
I noticed that last statistic he used is 83% of people under 40, but how many of those people are in the Republican Party? Then that's where he has to win his votes. That's his problem, which was the premise of the question that Chris Wallace asked at the beginning. And I love that follow-up question. How would you answer Johnny? Of course, it was just some Facebook question, but it almost sounded like some scared kid at home who thinks ISIS is under his bed or whatever. And I actually thought Rand Paul's answer was fairly reasonable about bulk phone record collection. And there's no, I made several videos, or in several videos talked about how there is no evidence that this bulk phone record collection has stopped any terrorist attacks. I think the only thing it ever really stopped was like some $8,000 financial transfer, which the NSA spying establishment plays up as, that could have been the seed of some huge plot, but that's not really stopping a terrorist attack. And anyway, that's one of those times Rand Paul's making sense. There are many other times he isn't, but I want to end the Republican side of the 2016 presidential race now. And so now I need to move over to the Democratic side, where basically I'm going to be covering Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and their race for the Democratic nomination. But that doesn't mean I'm done with Donald Trump, because the next clip, or the first clip I want to show in this topic, is actually another clip of the Donald Trump phone-in to CNN State of the Union with Jake Tapper, where Jake Tapper points out how badly Donald Trump does against Hillary Clinton in all these Republican to Democratic matchup polls, even though Donald Trump's doing well in the Republican field, since with 16 candidates he can be the front runner with 20% of the vote. And I never thought he'd get up to 25%, but he seems to be getting up in that range, which is surprising. But here you can see Jake Tapper ask him about why he doesn't do well against Hillary, and he doesn't really answer that question. Instead, he decides to spend some time attacking Hillary Clinton. I guess he is all of a sudden reminded, I'm spending all my time attacking Republicans. I guess maybe I should get some of my free media attention, or spend some of it on attacking Hillary Clinton over in this clip.
So let me ask you, this is without question a great poll for you. It does, however, if you dive deeper into the numbers, it does show some weaknesses, potentially, with the general electorate as opposed to with Republicans, and you lose to Hillary Clinton in a head-to-head matchup. What do you think you need to do to turn those numbers around?
It's just step by step. Honestly, it's step by step. I haven't focused on Hillary. In fact, yesterday in Iowa, I made some very strong statements about Hillary, really for, I wouldn't say the first time, but they were strong. And the fact is that what she's done is criminal. I mean, what she has done is criminal. I don't see how she can run. Because if the prosecutors, who are all Democrat, by the way, and that's, part of the problem with fairness here, they're all Democrats, so they're protecting her. But if you had an impartial prosecutor and they were honorable, and maybe they are, we're going to find out. But what she's done is criminal.
What exactly are you saying is criminal?
What she did is far worse than what General Petraeus did, and he's gone down in disgrace. I mean, you know, what he did is not as bad as what Hillary Clinton did, and it's similar, but it's not as bad. I mean, she got rid of her server. He never did anything like that.
But Mr. Trump,
and she did it after getting a subpoena from the United States Congress.
What are you saying that she did is criminal?
We'll see what happens, but I think Hillary's got a lot of problems. But you have to understand with me, it's step by step. When you and I spoke 3-4 months ago, I wasn't even going to be in the contest, according to various people. And now I'm leading easily in a lot of the races because people are sick and tired. So with Hillary, I think I'll beat Hillary easily. I think I will beat Hillary. I don't think these other guys will.
So let me just to clarify, what exactly are you charging that Hillary Clinton did is criminal? You're talking about this email news?
I'm talking about the whole email scandal. It's a scandal. I mean, she's been protected. It's been amazing to me how she's been protected. Even the fact that the Times changed their story, I respect the Times for going after her like that, but even the fact that they changed the story upon their request, I think they were more right the first time. But whether it was the first time or the second time, what Hillary did is criminal. And
I don't think it was a criminal.
Whether or not that takes her out of the race, but in theory, she shouldn't even be in the race. Now, whether she is or whether it's a guy like Sanders, which is hard to believe, but whether she is in the race or not, I go step by step. I'm not thinking too much about Hillary right now. I'm thinking about a man who's in favor of Common Core, a man who's weak on immigration, Jeb Bush, and a guy like Walker, who, frankly, his state is having tremendous difficulty. I love Wisconsin. It's a great place, but, he's putting debt up to the gills. The school system is a disaster because they don't have any money. I mean, Walker State, Wisconsin, is a catastrophe from an economic and a financial standpoint. I think he's number 36 or 38 overall in terms of the country for economic growth, and his jobs projection were way off. I mean, beyond. They have budget deficits. He was going to have a lot of big surplus. Well, we've got a $2.2 billion deficit.
I hear you.
So that was a big attack on Scott Walker from Donald Trump at the end, and after a little attack on Jeb Bush, he couldn't even spend the entire answer attacking Hillary Clinton. For some reason, he seems much more interested in attacking the Republicans, but he did attack Hillary Clinton, and he mentioned the whole email scandal and the referral to the FBI to see if she emailed or mishandled possibly classified material, and I'll cover that in a little bit. But first I want to show some Bernie Sanders clips, and the first clip is from, let me make sure I don't play the wrong clip here. Yeah, this is actually Jake Tapper, but before I get to the Bernie Sanders clip, this is Jake Tapper showing those polls that both show Trump in the lead and then show how Trump matches up against both Hillary and Bernie Sanders. Both of them beat Donald Trump, as you'll see over in this clip.
D.C., where the state of our union is within the margin of error. Brand new poll numbers into CNN this morning show Trump leading the Republican pack, though his lead over fellow frontrunner Jeb Bush is far more narrow in this, the first major poll since his controversial comments questioning Senator John McCain's war heroism. The new state of the race. Trump is at 18%. That's up 6 points from the last CNN poll. Bush is at 15%, and trailing in third, Scott Walker, governor of Wisconsin, with 10. On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton still dominates, but Bernie Sanders has some strong showings in head-to-head matchups with Republicans. Clinton beating Trump 56% to 40 and Bush 51% to 46. But Sanders also wins in a theoretical race against Trump 59 to 38 and nearly ties Bush 47% for Sanders, 48% for Bush. So much to talk about here. Let's bring in the host of
So those are the poll numbers that Jake Tapper was talking about in the previous clip that I showed, where both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders are beating Donald Trump. And Donald Trump has also bled into the Democratic side of the contest in another way, in that some people are comparing the appeal of Donald Trump to the appeal of Bernie Sanders. They're both sort of anti-establishment truth tellers, although Bernie Sanders has been, telling the same truths over and over again for many years, compared to Donald Trump, who's contradicting things he said just a few years ago, as I pointed out on previous shows. But I want to show how Bernie Sanders rejects the comparison to Donald Trump. This is, let me make sure I have the correct interview. Yeah, this is over on NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd asked Bernie Sanders about how the New York Times and the Washington Post have compared the appeal of Trump to the appeal of Bernie Sanders. And you'll see Senator Bernie Sanders rejects the comparison, but then he goes right to the populism that both the New York Times and the Washington Post say are what is similar about the two of them, that they're populist, anti-establishment figures. And anyway, you can watch that over in this clip.
And politics.
This morning, New York Times, Washington Post lump you and Donald Trump as are touching the same chord, but with very different ways. Do you buy that comparison?
No, I don't. I think the chord that we are touching all over this country is that people are profoundly disgusted with an economics that make the richest people richer and everybody else poorer. They are profoundly angered and disturbed by a political campaign system that allows billionaires to buy elections because of this disastrous campaign finance system called Citizens United. And what I have said is, if elected president, we're going to pass a constitutional amendment to get rid of Citizens United so that we'll restore democracy in America and not move to oligarchy. This is a huge, huge issue.
So you don't buy these comparisons to Trump and the chord and the populist chord he's touching either?
No, we are having working people who are saying that it is absurd that almost all new income and all new wealth is going to the top 1%. They can't afford to send their kids to college. They can't afford child care for their kids. They're working longer hours for low wages. We want an economy that works for all of us and not just the billionaire class. We want a campaign finance system that ordinary people can run for office on without being dependent on the Koch brothers and other billionaires.
All right, Senator Bernie Sanders.
So, I don't know. I mean, Senator Bernie Sanders there rejected the comparison to Donald Trump, but he actually did sort of go to a populist message. I mean, I think he's more an authentic populist than Donald Trump is, but there is something to the comparison of both of them as populists, I guess, even though one of them is sort of a fake populist. And I want to show how NBC's Meet the Press did this analysis even further. After Bernie Sanders rejected the comparison, you'll see this report from Chuck Todd where he compares both Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump to previous populists like Ross Perot, and you can also see Pat Buchanan is one of the other anti-establishment populists, and they did an interview with Pat Buchanan that I'm not going to show, but here's the introductory story making all the comparisons and looking back in history over in this clip.
I want to move to, it's no secret that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders have very little in common. You just saw it there. Bernie doesn't even want to go there. But less known is that there is something they do share. They are starting more conventional rivals by surging in the polls, thanks to two very different strains of a classical American political movement, populism.
You got it.
On the right,
he talks about what needs to be talked about, which is something that most politicians just dance around.
And on the left,
I think he would stop the corporatocracy that's going on in America.
Trump and Sanders supporters are disenchanted with what they see as a broken system, fed up with political correctness and Washington dysfunction. Economic anxiety is fueling both campaigns, but that's where the similarities end. Sanders supporters are likely to be white, liberal, and have a college education. And despite his focus on income inequality, most of his support comes from voters earning more than $50,000 a year. Trump supporters are also more likely to be white, but without a college degree. He performs somewhat better among self-described moderates.
We have a tremendous danger on the border with the illegals coming in.
And Trump is taking advantage of a powerful wedge issue in the Republican primary, immigration.
We're tired of the dishonesty and the people that just can't do anything.
He's not worried about being politically correct. You can't buy him, okay? He has some ideas that people need to pay attention to.
We've seen this attempt to appeal to Republican voters who feel left behind economically and culturally before. Pat Buchanan channeled anxiety inside the GOP in 1992 and again in 1996.
You watch the establishment, all the knights and barons will be riding into the castle, pulling up the drawbridge in a minute. Because they're coming. All the peasants are coming with pitchforks after them.
Thank you.
Another wealthy businessman, Ross Perot, tapped a coalition of the disaffected back in 1992, winning 19% of the vote by exploiting fears that NAFTA would send jobs overseas.
there will be a giant sucking sound going south.
And if Trump follows Perot and takes the independent route,
Trump would be sliding into the Perot slot of 92 and sort of standing as a surrogate for the same voters, and it would do the same thing. It would mean once again a third Clinton might get elected with less than 50% of the vote.
But between Clinton and the nomination, there's Bernie Sanders, a modern-day Eugene McCarthy, with a message on economic inequality that's drawing crowds.
All of our workers from coast to coast need at least $15 an hour.
10,000 in Madison, Wisconsin, 7,500 in Portland, Maine, 2,500 in Council Bluffs, Iowa.
He's not bought by the billionaires. He's honest, and he stands up for what he believes in, and you can't buy him.
The better Sanders does, the more attention Hillary Clinton has to give to the progressives in her own party.
I'm joined
now. So that's not bad if Hillary Clinton has to give more attention to the progressives in her party. I mean, I don't think that the issues that she has to move towards are going to hurt her in the general general election in the same way that when Republicans have to play to their base, they take these real weird, crazy positions. But, you know, being more, being harder on Wall Street or being less hawkish on foreign policy, I think both those things move Hillary Clinton more towards electability and not away from it, unlike, you know, being anti-immigrant or being, I don't know, what are some of the other weird Republican positions? Oh, like being anti-marriage equality, or that a lot of the Republicans are going to be anti-marriage equality, or now they want to shut down Planned Parenthood, so they're like attacking reproductive rights. Although I'll show the secret right-wing video that was recorded of Planned Parenthood a little later in the show. But before I get to that, I want to show another clip of Bernie Sanders. This is in response to a clip I showed last week where Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley were at this Netroots left progressive convention, and the Black Lives Matter protesters interrupted what Bernie Sanders and Martin O'Malley were saying, and Martin O'Malley got in trouble for saying all lives matter, you know, white lives matter, all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter. And Chuck Todd asked Bernie Sanders about whether he, you know, was not in tune with the protesters and whether he understood what was going on. And he actually mentions the Sandra Bland issue that I'll be covering in a couple separate clips later in the show. But here's how Bernie Sanders deals with the issue of race. And in general, I think that he responds well to it, even with the follow-up questions from Chuck Todd about whether he's over-prioritizing class issues instead of race issues. And I'll talk about that a little more after you see that over here.
I want to move to, you last night spoke at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Of course, it's a major civil rights organization, a lot of history there. But I want to play a clip that you had sort of a reaction last week at Netroots Nation in a confrontation with the Black Lives Matter
protest. I didn't have a confrontation. What I had was, I was there to speak about immigration reform. And some people started disrupting the meeting. And the issue that they raised was, in fact, a very important issue about Black Lives Matter, about Sandra Bland, about black people getting yanked out of, in this case of Sandra Bland, getting yanked out of an automobile, thrown to the ground, and ending up dead 3 days later because of a minor traffic violation. So this is not a, you know, this is issues which is a very important issue, an issue of concern that I strongly share.
Well, I guess there were some people who felt that you were being too dismissive of the protesters.
No, I'm not dismissive. I've been involved in the civil rights movement all of my life. And I believe that we have to deal with this issue of institutional racism. But this is what I also believe. And speaking to the SCLC last night, this is what I quoted. Martin Luther King, when he died, when he was assassinated, understood and was working on a poor people's march. We have to end institutional racism, but we have to deal with the reality that 50% of young black kids are unemployed, that we have massive poverty in our country, and we have an unsustainable level of income and wealth inequality.
The criticism that's come to you at this, though, is that your answer is always economic injustice, and that many African-American activists believe, no. You've got to deal with race. Racism is a separate, institutional racism is a separate problem from economic injustice.
They are parallel problems. They are absolutely correct. But as Martin Luther King Jr. told us, we have to address both. We have to rid this country of racism. What we saw in Charleston, South Carolina, a few weeks ago, a guy motivated by hate groups who goes out and kills black people because they're black. Sandra Bland being yanked out of a car, dying 3 days later for what?
Yep.
For minor traffic violation. But my view is that we have got to deal with the fact that the middle class of this country is disappearing, that we have millions of people working for wages that are much too low, impacts everybody, impacts the African-American community even more. Those are issues that do have to be dealt with just at the same time as we deal with institutional racism.
Let me go to economic.
So I thought that was a pretty good answer from Bernie Sanders, and he sounded a lot better there than he did up on that stage at Netroots Nation. If you go back and watch the clip I showed last week, he seemed almost like a cranky old man on the Netroots Nation stage, and he explained in the clip I just showed there that he was talking about some other issue and was interrupted. But I don't know. I think especially on the more progressive side, you have to be more tolerant of those type of interruptions and, letting activists take over the stage. The moderator there was Jose Antonio Vargas, who's an undocumented immigrant and a filmmaker, and I think he won a Pulitzer Prize for his journalism. And I saw an interview of him later saying that he couldn't have felt that he had personal integrity if he didn't give the microphone over to the Black Lives Matter Black Lives Matter movement people who were disrupting the talk. So anyway, you can let me know if you think that Bernie Sanders made up this week in that answer for his slightly cranky old man performance last week. And before I leave the Democratic side of the 2016 campaign, I have to cover the latest chapter of the Hillary email scandal. This is the report that was in the New York Times that sort of got toned down a couple times after it was first reported. Originally, they were saying that there was a criminal referral to the Justice Department looking into whether Hillary Clinton mishandled classified information by emailing it using her own personal email. And then it got toned down to they were looking at the handling of the possible classified information, and the word criminal got dropped from the New York Times story. And I'm going to show a few clips on this. First, I want to show how this is how Chuck Todd introduced both the bad poll numbers for Hillary Clinton in terms of her honesty and trustworthiness, and then a little bit of coverage of the email scandal developments from NBC's Meet the Press over in this clip.
In New Hampshire. But we're going to start by focusing on the battle for the Democratic nomination in those new NBC News surveys out of Iowa and New Hampshire. There's some particularly troubling news for the Hillary Clinton campaign, confirming that there is a negative trend happening here. Her favorability numbers are dismal. Remember, Iowa and New Hampshire are actual swing states in a general election. So in Iowa, look at this, 56% of all voters have an unfavorable view of the former Secretary of State, just 37% view her favorably. It's the same story in New Hampshire. 57% say they have an unfavorable view of her, and an identical 37% say they have a favorable one. And all this has impacted her lead over Senator Bernie Sanders among Democratic voters in Iowa. Clinton leads Sanders 55-26. It's a solid lead until you realize this. She was up 61 points when we surveyed in February. In New Hampshire, she had a 56-point lead back in February. Well, that lead has shrunk down to just 13 points, 47-34. All of this as the Hillary email controversy is in the news again. Did she have classified emails on her private server? Did she know? Will the Justice Department investigate? When will she testify before the Benghazi Congressional Committee? She tried to address some of the controversy after an event in Iowa last night.
I am confident that I never sent nor received any information that was classified at the time it was sent and received. And what I think you're seeing here is a very typical kind of discussion, to some extent disagreement among various parts of the government over what should or should not be publicly released.
A much ado about nothing defense there from her. We're going to get a lot more on the Clinton email controversy later.
well, I'm not going to do a lot more on the Clinton email controversy, but I'm going to show two other stories covering what happened. The next one is from the ABC This Week with George Stephanopoulos reporter Cecelia Vega, who covers the Hillary Clinton campaign, and you can see her covering those same facts in a little more depth from the program this morning in this clip.
Hillary Clinton firing back.
I am confident that I never sent nor received any information that was classified at the time it was sent and received.
In Iowa, trying to put out the growing firestorm over Emailgate. The FBI, now the latest Washington watchdog, called on to investigate. Of the 55,000 emails Clinton turned over to the State Department, internal investigators for the intelligence community now say at least 4 and potentially hundreds more included classified national security information when they were sent over her private email account and home server. Clinton saying she did nothing wrong.
I did not receive anything that was marked as classified.
The investigators' referral to the Justice Department does not seek a criminal probe and does not target Clinton personally. The Justice Department has not yet decided how it will respond. The controversy has not slowed down since March, when Clinton admitted that she used her private account for official business. She said, for convenience.
Looking back, it would have been better if I'd simply used a second email account and carried a second phone.
Now Republicans on Capitol Hill fired up, once again demanding Clinton turn over her email server. House Speaker John Boehner saying her poor judgment has undermined our national security, and it is time for her to finally do the right thing.
I have released
Clinton revealing that in October she plans to publicly testify before a House committee investigating the Benghazi terrorist attacks. For This Week, Cecelia Vega, ABC News, New York.
So that was the ABC News report from Cecelia Vega, and you saw some more of the details, how there may have been possibly 4 known emails that she sent that included information that's now classified, or may have even been classified at the time, although, to be fair to Hillary Clinton, as they say in the Fox News report I'm about to show, the classified material, even if it was classified at the time, wasn't marked classified, which for a criminal referral, I think it would have to be marked classified for you to be guilty of a crime. It has to be pretty clear that you're committing a crime, or that's the way I understand criminal law. But I want to show one more news report on the Hillary Clinton email scandal. That is the latest chapter with the referral to the FBI and the Justice Department. This is the Fox News reporter Ed Henry, and like I said, to be fair, he does even say to be fair to Hillary Clinton, they have to report that it wasn't marked classified, and it's not that bad a report, even though it's Fox News, although this is the only one that has sort of a gratuitous reference to Monica Lewinsky. I don't know why they had to fit that in, but they apparently did on Fox News Sunday this morning. Here.
Chris, this weekend, Hillary Clinton is trying to finally rip the Band-Aid off and get this scandal behind her. But there are new signs today. More political and even legal problems could be coming.
I never sent nor received any information that was classified at the time it was sent and received.
Eager to turn the page on her email troubles, Hillary Clinton abruptly revealed Saturday she'll testify before the House Select Committee on Benghazi in October, setting up a showdown with the Republican Chairman Trey Gowdy, who could uncover new revelations 4 months before the Iowa caucuses.
I have said repeatedly that I will answer questions before the House committee.
Yet there's a dispute over which questions. Clinton lawyer David Kendall, a veteran of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, wants to limit it to Benghazi and lock in October 22nd as Clinton's only appearance to finish this before 2016. Gowdy will not agree to a date yet because the State Department has been slow to turn over emails. Republicans worry key documents will be held back until after the appearance. A committee aide adding while Clinton wants only Benghazi questions, quote, her email arrangement clearly falls within the scope of the Select Committee's jurisdiction. That arrangement came under fire again after 2 inspectors general found Clinton sent at least 4 emails with classified information, despite this promise.
There is no classified material.
In fairness to Clinton, the emails did not contain classification markings, though investigators believe her server may contain hundreds more classified emails. While Clinton aides pounced on the New York Times, dialing back on its original report, suggesting it's now a criminal matter, Republicans note the improper handling of classified information can lead to charges. And this week, the State Department is slated to release more of Clinton's emails in response to a court order, which could lead to more revelations, especially if the intelligence community blocks the release of some of those emails to prevent the leak of more classified information. Chris?
So I guess it's an ongoing story. I've never really thought it's that big a scandal, and even with this referral to the Justice Department, it seems like it's these inspector generals making sure that they do no appearance of impropriety, no favoring of Hillary Clinton, although inspectors general are independent investigators anyway, they're not political. And the Justice Department is, they have career prosecutors, and then they have the political appointees, and I don't see how either group would really find this to be criminal if it wasn't marked as classified. Like I said, you actually have to have intent. That the David Petraeus example that was brought up on several news shows, there was no question he should have known that the stuff he gave to his biographer and possibly mistress, I think, if I read the story, if I'm remembering the stories, his biographer and the classified material that he gave to her was definitely classified, marked classified, and without it being marked classified, you don't have the criminal intent for any sort of criminal prosecution, I don't think, although it does create a little more, another chapter in the scandal. But anyway, before I leave this topic, the last clip I want to show on the Hillary Clinton email scandal, or the 2016 presidential campaign from the Democratic side, is as soon as I saw that there was another chapter in the Hillary Clinton email scandal, I actually said to I bet that's going to be the top story on Fox News Sunday, and of course it was the top story. And then of course the Planned Parenthood secret videos were the number 2 story. I didn't even guess that. And then they also did this weird thing where they emphasized the Trump third party run possibility that I showed in some of those earlier clips, but not really the fact that he's the front runner, although they showed Trump saying he's the front runner at the end of this clip. This is like the first 84 seconds of Fox News Sunday this morning, with Hillary Clinton email scandal, the number 1 story in the country for Fox News Sunday to cover this morning here.
I'm Chris Wallace. Will Hillary Clinton face an FBI investigation over the handling of special secrets on her personal email?
I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. We are all accountable to the American people to get the facts right, and I will do my part.
Plus,
in negotiations, the person who throws out the figure first is at a loss, right? So.
The fallout over a new Planned Parenthood undercover video and what it means for the abortion debate. We'll discuss both issues when presidential candidate Fiorina debates Jess McIntosh, a top official with Emily's List. Then Senator Rand Paul tries to reignite his campaign.
I'm Rand Paul, and I'm trying to kill the tax code, all 70,000 pages of it.
We'll ask the Kentucky senator about his strategy to regain his momentum ahead of the first presidential debate. And our Sunday group weighs in on a slump in the polls for Clinton and Donald Trump's threat to run as a third-party candidate.
Look, I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative, I'm running, I'm in first place.
All right now.
So I guess they did show Donald Trump saying he was in first place, but they really focused on him being a third-party candidate. And it's kind of silly that the top 2 stories of the week were the Hillary Clinton email scandal and those Planned Parenthood secret videos that I'm actually going to cover the Planned Parenthood story in just a few minutes. But two important stories that I don't think Fox News Sunday covered at all, or maybe just in passing. I don't think they covered them at all, except maybe one of the panel members mentioned one of them. But they did not cover the shooting in Lafayette, Louisiana by this guy, what's his name, John Russell Howser, that actually might be an anti-feminist shooting, or I think it's actually the guy was nuts. But that's the next topic I want to cover. And actually, Fox News Sunday didn't cover the whole Sandra Bland thing. That might be something that one person mentioned on a panel. I'm not sure, but there certainly wasn't any of the top stories, and I think maybe have been totally not covered at all, unless I'm forgetting one reference in a panel discussion. But here's the story about the Louisiana shooting, and this is actually Jake Tapper talking about how it may actually have been an anti-feminist shooting. You know, the shooting was at a showing of Amy Schumer's movie Trainwreck. Also, Judd Apatow directed the movie, I'm pretty sure. And Amy Schumer, definitely has a feminist perspective. Here's Jake Tapper's coverage of it. Did not get covered on Fox News Sunday, but here it is on CNN State of the Union this morning here.
The Union, I'm Jake Tapper. 3 people remain hospitalized this morning after the shooting at a Lafayette, Louisiana movie theater that left 2 innocent women dead. Police have not yet defined a motive, but a talk radio host who knew the shooter told the Washington Post that he had, quote, an issue with feminine rights. He was opposed to women having a say in anything, unquote. The theater that the shooter targeted was screening the movie Trainwreck, a film written by and starring comedian Amy Schumer. Police say that the shooter did buy his gun legally at a pawn shop in Louisiana. A pawn shop in Alabama, rather. Louisiana governor and Republican presidential candidate Bobby Jindal was asked whether the shooting presented an opportunity to talk about further restrictions on gun ownership.
There will be an absolute appropriate time for us to talk about policies and politics, and I'm sure that folks will want to score political points off this tragedy as they've tried to do off previous tragedies. Right now, let's focus on these families.
Back with us.
So I guess Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal wanted to focus on the families on Friday and not score political points. But now it's 2 days later, and you'll see in the next clip I want to show from CBS's Face the Nation, Bobby Jindal was happy to use the occasion to score some political points, although he also talked some more about the families at the end of the clip I'm going to show. But he also wanted to talk about how since this gun was bought in Alabama, it couldn't have been bought in Louisiana because they have stronger gun laws, and he wasn't too shy about standing up for those stronger gun laws. But you'll see that's more in the middle of this answer. At the beginning of the answer, he also seems to imply that maybe the security that was at the movie theater on other nights or at other theaters may have scared this guy away, and they don't talk about the anti-feminist part about this or his motives. That's the beginning of this clip. John Dickerson on Face the Nation asked Bobby Jindal, governor of Louisiana, what he's learned about the motives, and Bobby Jindal talks about reading the police are reading the journals and stuff, but never mentions anti-feminist or the fact that he was like a Tea Party member or any of that stuff over in this clip.
Investigators are still trying to determine what prompted John Russell Howser to go on a shooting rampage Thursday night at a movie theater in Lafayette, Louisiana. Howser killed 2 and injured 9 before he turned his gun on himself. CBS News has obtained this security video of Howser at the hotel he'd been staying at just prior to the shooting. Howser had a long history of mental illness, but he purchased the handgun he used in the shooting legally in Alabama. We go now to Lafayette and the governor of Louisiana, Bobby Jindal. Governor, have you learned anything more about what prompted this attack?
John, look, I know that law enforcement continues their investigation. They're going through the journals they found in that hotel room. They've talked to his family members. We know some things that we didn't know in just the last couple of days. For example, it appears, and they're still trying to run down this and confirm this, it appears he may have been in other movie theaters in South Louisiana. We may never know exactly why he chose Lafayette, why he chose Thursday night. We know this theater had security on Friday and Saturday night. We know he chose a theater with an exit that allowed him to park his car near that exit. It appeared that he was trying to escape. He had a wig, he had disguises in the car, in the hotel room. So, John, they continue to try to piece together why he came here and why he chose Thursday night to disrupt these innocent people's lives. We may never have answers to all of those questions, though.
Governor, as people are searching for some kind of answer in the wake of this, what's your feeling about the fact that here you had somebody with a history of mental illness who had been committed, but yet still, despite those two things, was able to purchase a gun?
John, that never should have happened. You know, here in Louisiana, we actually passed tougher laws a couple of years ago so that, for example, if Howser had been involuntarily committed here in Louisiana, that information would have automatically, we would have reported that to the national background check system. He wouldn't have been able to buy a gun. He wouldn't have been able to go into that pawn shop and buy that gun as he did in another state. So, look, every time this happens, it seems like the person has a history of mental illness. We need to make sure the systems we have in place actually work. Like I said, in Louisiana, we toughened our laws a couple of years ago. If he'd been involuntarily committed here, if he tried to buy that gun here, he wouldn't have been allowed to do that.
So is it an issue in your mind of making sure that cross-state, that other states are following the laws better? Or, I mean, how does a person searching for a solution here, what do they look to?
Well, absolutely. I think every state should strengthen their laws. Every state should make sure this information is being reported in the background system. We need to make sure that background system is working. Absolutely. In this instance, this man never should have been able to buy a gun. John, there is evil in the world. And look, I know a lot of folks here are upset, but are also very angry that somebody would walk in and feel like he had the right to take away these innocent lives, to disrupt these families. Look, I talked to the father Thursday night. I actually went to the emergency room, talked to the father of the first little girl, the first woman that was shot. John, he was desperately hoping, he couldn't find information, been to all the hospital. He was desperately hoping his daughter had survived, that somehow she had just gotten lost in the shuffle. First responders went back in, they got the driver's license. She happened to be the very first person that Howser shot and killed. That is news no father.
That's kind of sad looking at those pictures, and the people who he killed were young women, or women of various ages. The two women who were killed, I think one was in her 20s, one was in her 30s. And, you know, I first heard that, and I thought, you know, I wonder if this is some sort of like and because I heard about his history of domestic violence against his ex-wife, and I thought maybe it was one of those like anti-feminist things, kind of like the UC Santa Barbara shooting, you know, just in terms of speculation, not drawing any final conclusions. Though one of the things I thought about is, you know, the fact that he shot women at a showing of Trainwreck, does that mean that he was targeting women, or just that a lot of the members of the audience at a showing of Trainwreck are going to be women? So, of course, there's been more developments in terms of his, you know, blogs, and in terms of his online postings, that he did have some problem with women, and he said some positive things about Hitler, and he posted a swastika on his house when he had to, like, he had some problem with his house where before it was foreclosed or condemned or something, he like put cement in the plumbing and posted a swastika on it. And but basically, I think beyond any of this ideology stuff, the guy was more crazy, bipolar, psychotic, and that tends to be a thread through a lot of these shootings, even some of the ones that are called terrorism and some that aren't called terrorism. Lone wolf or just lone gunman. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. There wasn't actually that much coverage of the Lafayette shooting on the Sunday morning shows. They discussed it more in terms of the pundits than actual news coverage. I showed you the main clips there. I also want to show a couple clips on the issue of race, including this whole Sandra Bland issue, which wasn't covered very much on the Sunday shows either. I showed that clip earlier of Senator Bernie Sanders talking about Sandra Bland and what happened to her in Texas. That was part of a longer interview on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Their Justice Department, their Senior Justice Department correspondent Pierre Thomas had an extended interview with the new U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch and talked about the issue of race. And, she started right before the whole Baltimore controversy, the Freddie Gray rough ride situation and the riots there, and then the shooting in Charleston. And that was sort of the big context that Pierre Thomas put on this interview that he had. And they also discussed Sandra Bland and showed some of the video of her arrest and talked about that issue, as I'll discuss after you see that clip over here.
Here's Pierre Thomas.
From the day Loretta Lynch took office, it was clear she would have to confront race as an explosive and divisive issue. Just hours after her swearing in, parts of Baltimore were burning. Unrest ignited by the death of another black man, Freddie Gray, after a rough ride in a police van. Then just a few weeks later, the unthinkable, massacre in a black church.
Were you shocked? I don't know if I was shocked so much as disturbed and saddened.
But out of a hellish, hateful act, Lynch says she sees racial progress in a state with a polarizing past.
The example after Charleston, not just from the victims, but from the city and from the state and really from the country, was one that said we reject that type of thinking.
The child of the South and daughter of a Baptist preacher who grew up just a few miles away in North Carolina said South Carolina was forced to heal old lingering wounds. The Confederate battle flag flying over the state capitol, chief among them.
Certainly people who expressed a positive view of it or historical view of the flag had to concede that for so many other people, it was a symbol of great pain and great division. And if you want to have it as an historical piece, I think a museum is the perfect place for it.
Race. Clearly there's been progress. South Carolina showed it in the aftermath of the killing there. You and I are sitting here. But race still remains a vexing issue. Why do you think there's still so much mistrust in some minority communities as it relates to police?
I think that we have a situation where many minority communities for so long have felt that law enforcement was coming in to essentially enforce laws against them, not to protect them.
According to Lynch, violent protest is never justified. But she suggested recent incidents caught on tape are forcing the country to confront the simmering frustrations of many minorities. Recently, a black man in South Carolina repeatedly shot by a white police officer, including in the back after a traffic stop. Now Sandra Bland, the black woman, dead after a failure to use a turn signal, escalated into her going to jail.
I do think that what has been an important part of the debate in Ms. Bland's death has been the discussions that we've seen from community members and police leaders alike about the importance of training in de-escalating incidents.
She suggested cases like Bland reinforce black anger.
I think that it highlights the concern of many in the black community that a routine stop for many of the members of the black community is not handled with the same professionalism and courtesy that other people may get from the police.
You know, there are some who've been saying if black folk would just follow the instruction of the police, this wouldn't happen. Is that a fair assessment?
You know, I think every case is different.
Now, some police organizations have said they would like less scrutiny and more support from the Justice Department in recognizing the difficulties of their job.
Many police departments also feel frustrated. I think they feel that they get the scrutiny and they get the complaints and the criticism, and they don't get the support. And I think it's a very, very important voice in this debate.
A heated, complicated debate that is ongoing. For this week, Pierre Thomas, ABC News, Washington.
So I actually thought that was a fairly good report and interview by Pierre Thomas on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, which I want to emphasize because a little bit later I'm going to criticize the other half of Pierre Thomas's interview with Loretta Lynch, the U.S. Attorney General, that sort of is kind of a scare tactic on the threat of ISIS. That'll be like the last clip in the show, I think. But before I leave this issue of race and specifically the arrest and death of Sandra Bland, which wasn't covered that much on the Sunday morning shows, I do want to show how Rick Perry, the former governor of Texas, answered a question about this issue over on CNN State of the Union Jake Tapper asked him about it and showed a clip of the actual arrest video, the way the police officer really escalated the situation. That's one of the things that's most disturbing about the arrest. And it's so disturbing that even Republican presidential candidate and former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, had to at least admit that this officer was not following protocol. Although I think he may mispronounce protocol. You let me know after you watch it over in this clip.
I want to ask you about Sandra Bland, the African-American woman in Texas who died in her cell after being held there for 3 days following a stop for not signaling. You've made it a point in your campaign to reach out to African-American voters, to reach out to Latino voters. This is obviously an issue that many African-Americans are talking about and focused on right now. Here's some of the video from the dash cam from that stop.
Get out of the car now!
Why am I being apprehended? You're trying to give me a ticket
I said
for your failure?
get out of the car.
Why am I being apprehended? You
I'm giving you a lawful order. I'm going to drag you out of here.
So you're threatening to drag me out of my own car?
Get out of the car!
And then you
I will light you up. Get out!
Wow.
Now!
Wow.
Now, the autopsy result is concluded that she did kill herself in the cell, but beyond what happened in the cell, just looking at this dash cam video, as the former governor of Texas, as somebody who was in charge and command of state troopers, what's your reaction to the behavior of that state trooper?
Well, obviously, I don't think they followed protocol. I think that has been from the very early viewing of that camera that there was not proper protocol followed there. And this is going to be investigated as it should. And transparency is really important in this process, so that all the citizens of the state of Texas know that this has been appropriately investigated, and if it's found that individuals made errors, then that needs to be addressed in an appropriate way.
The FBI director.
So, yeah, I noticed in the introduction to, or in the question that Jake Tapper asked former Texas Governor Rick Perry there, he mentioned the autopsy showing that Sandra Bland had committed suicide, and I don't know if that's as conclusive as what Jake Tapper said there, although maybe it is true. I haven't researched it or seen what the latest breaking news is, but I thought that was actually also still a controversy as to whether she had actually committed suicide. But I thought that the fact that former governor of Texas Rick Perry had to say that what he saw in that video was at least a breach of protocol, that showed that this was a pretty bad behavior on the part of this police officer. That's kind of the way you can tell how bad the police have acted. If there's a split between the Democrats and the Republicans, and the Republicans and Fox News are supporting the police, then there's at least some, that there might be some sort of justification for the police behavior, even if it's not very strong justification. But when even people like Rick Perry and Fox News, and I even saw a clip of some pundits on Fox News attacking the way this police officer escalated the situation with Sandra Bland, when everyone is criticizing the police officer, not even the usual suspects on the right like Fox News and the Republican presidential candidates are willing to support the police officer, then there's really some bad behavior, and that's going to be a continuing story. Maybe there'll be more coverage on the Sunday shows, maybe there won't. I guess we'll have to see on that. But now I want to move on to the next topic. This was one of the ones that was covered on Fox News Sunday, and it was actually covered on Fox News Sunday last week, and I just skipped over it. But this week it was on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. This is the Planned Parenthood issue, the secret recording by this right-wing anti-abortion group of a couple officials at Planned Parenthood talking about fetal tissue donation in a way that, as David Wright, the reporter for ABC, said on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, it was callous conversations. And although there are some charges that Planned Parenthood violated the law in terms of selling fetal material instead of getting the costs for transporting donated material reimbursed, and There are also questions about whether they altered the procedures in order to get material which would violate the law. I'll cover both those issues, but first I want to show the ABC report from reporter David Wright that sort of gives an overview of what happened over in this clip.
Cover videos secretly taped by anti-abortion activists have raised questions about the group's ethics, reignited the debate over federal funding, and Planned Parenthood's president is here live for her first interview since the tapes came to light. After this from ABC's David Wright.
It's a hidden camera sting of the most influential abortion rights group in America. 2 videos that purport to show Planned Parenthood officials callously over lunch discussing selling parts of human fetuses.
Yeah, livers.
Remedies too, which that's simple. I mean, that's easy.
The man off camera is David Daleiden, an anti-abortion activist who claims Planned Parenthood is trying to make a profit from the abortions it performs.
Bottom line, Planned Parenthood's sale of aborted baby parts is about money and is about soothing their consciences for the late-term abortions that they do.
Planned Parenthood denies that, even on the video, insisting the prices are only to cover costs.
Nobody should be selling tissue. That's just not the goal here. This is a way to offer patients a service that they want, do good for the medical community.
The group also alleges the videos were selectively edited. That said, Planned Parenthood officials have apologized for the lack of compassion shown on the videos, which have set off a firestorm.
This video and the one from last week are both gruesome.
Republicans in Congress are opening 2 separate investigations.
I could talk about the video, but I think I'd vomit.
Many Republicans calling to cut all federal funding for Planned Parenthood. Democrat Hillary Clinton defends the group, dismissing the videos as a smear campaign.
It's really an attack against a woman's right to choose.
There may be more bombshells to come. Daleiden says he has more videos in the works.
There's going to be at least 10, possibly a dozen more videos to come over the coming days and weeks.
The abortion rights group has weathered plenty of tough fights in the past. The question now, can they withstand this? For this week, David Wright, ABC News.
Now, regarding those upcoming videos that were in that ABC report from David Wright, that was the first question that George Stephanopoulos asked Cecile Richards, the head of Planned Parenthood, who gave an interview that to ABC that I'm going to show a few clips from. This first her answer to the possibility of upcoming videos in this clip.
Thank you for joining us this morning. You just heard David say right there, 10 to 12 more tapes coming. Are you worried about what they're going to show?
No, in the sense that, of course, this has been a 3-year, well-funded effort by the most militant wing of the anti-abortion movement in this country to try to entrap doctors, and of course, highly doctored videos, which show absolutely, doctors repeatedly said, it's all been edited out, Planned Parenthood does not at all profit from fetal tissue donation, which is an important element of healthcare research in this country. I think what's not told is that, of course, these are highly selectively edited. The folks behind this, in fact, are part of the most militant wing of the anti-abortion movement that has been behind, the bombing of clinics, the murder of doctors in their homes and in their churches, and that's what actually needs to be looked at.
But you have apologized.
So, yeah, that is just the initial answer from Cecile Richards, and I cut it off there before George Stephanopoulos began answering the next question I'm going to show, which is about her apology. She apologized for the tone, and George Stephanopoulos asked if any of the employee or the officials at Planned Parenthood had been reprimanded, and she does say that they have been, but she also emphasizes that they didn't actually do anything wrong beyond the tone they used, and that's this clip here.
But you have apologized for Dr. Nicotola's tone in the statements, reports that she's been reprimanded. So have you spoken to her and the other staff member, Mary Gatter? How have they been reprimanded?
They've been reprimanded for their tone, absolutely. But what I want to really make clear, George, is Planned Parenthood has broken no laws. We have the highest standards. The care and health care and safety of our patients is our most important priority. In fact, Planned Parenthood has, for 99 years, been one of the largest nonprofit healthcare providers of women in this country. 1 in 5 women in this country depend on Planned Parenthood for health care, more than 2.5 million people every single year.
You say that no Planned Parenthood affiliate has profited.
And when I cut off there, George Stephanopoulos started asking about the question of whether Planned Parenthood profited from these fetal tissue donations. And I've looked over the transcripts and the unedited video. This group edited video together that made it look like they were profiting from fetal tissue donations, and they cut out like 10 different times when the Planned Parenthood official said, we can't profit from this. We're just reimbursing costs, and that issue I don't think is that big an issue. But there's this second issue that I think it's a little more ambiguous about whether they altered their procedures in order to harvest tissue for donation. There's actually a law that I'll show in a Fox News clip in just a minute that says it's under the U.S. code, and I looked at it on the Department of Health and Human Services. Basically says that you can't alter any sort of procedure solely for the purpose of harvesting tissue for donation. You have to do the abortion the way you normally would do it, or at least that can't be the sole reason for changing the way you do it. And George Stephanopoulos actually asks Cecile Richards about that, and she says they never changed their procedures, but she doesn't really address the actual things that the officials said in the tapes, and I'll get to that a little more after I show that last answer from Cecile Richards on ABC this morning here.
The second issue they raised, the tapes appear to describe times when the clinics adjust the abortion procedure to better harvest
It's not done.
the fetal organs.
It's absolutely not done. And I've talked to doctors all across the country. And look, we're
but it
totally
does
open
appear
to...
that's what's being described in these tapes.
Well, it's because these tapes have been edited and they've tried to entrap doctors to say things. And listen, I stand behind the health care that we provide at Planned Parenthood. Women trust Planned Parenthood. And I look forward to anyone who wants to look into our policies and procedures. I mean, we've said that to Congress. The facts are on...
But when these doctors are talking about, and this gets graphic, but they're talking about less crunchy ways to perform these abortions so that the organs can be preserved, what's happening there? Are they just lying?
No, that's absolutely... All of this is taken out of context. What happens in this country at Planned Parenthood and other hospitals is that women in a very few places are allowed to donate fetal tissue for life-saving medical research. Research that is, developing cures for Parkinson's and for Alzheimer's, even the Ebola vaccine. To me, this isn't something that actually should be criticized or made fun of. This is actually laudable that women and their families choose to make fetal tissue donations in order to potentially save lives of other folks. And I think...
As long as the procedure is never altered, and you're stating that unequivocally.
That's right.
Any other...
So the head of Planned Parenthood there, Cecile Richards, did state unequivocally that they don't alter their procedures to better harvest fetal tissue. But if you listen to some of the clips, and I'm going to show a Fox News clip, the two Fox News clips coming up, and the second one actually has the clips of one of the officials saying that they're, or maybe both of them saying that they're, changing the way that they grasp the fetus so that it doesn't destroy the liver or the heart or whatever, and to better get it out intact. And then there's another official saying that they, will talk to a doctor about maybe doing it in a less crunchy way. But I actually went over these transcripts with my wife, who's an OBGYN, and she gave me a possible other interpretation of what they're saying. First, getting the fetus out intact is important for the health of the mother, because leaving tissue behind means that you have to go back and get that tissue and increases the risk of trauma. If you can get everything out intact, it doesn't require multiple trips to get out more tissue, and so that's better for the pregnant woman who's the patient. And then the pregnant woman also benefits if you don't shatter the certain parts of the body that create bone fragments, like the thorax, where they talk about doing it in a less crunchy way. That sounds kind of gross, but it's actually talking about avoiding these bone shards that can also risk perforations. So a lot of the things they're talking about, even though they help get out fetal tissue intact, they also help the health of the pregnant patient. So I wanted to point that out before I move on to these Fox News clips. First, there's one of Carly Fiorina. They had on Carly Fiorina, the Republican presidential candidate, on one side, and then this woman, Jess McIntosh, a official at Emily's List, which is this more progressive political organization that donates to women. It's like Emily stands for early money is like yeast. You know, it causes candidates to rise, I guess. But first, here's Fox News Sunday, like teeing up an easy softball question to Carly Fiorina about altering procedures to harvest fetal tissue, and she doesn't even get the issue right over in this clip.
Okay, let's turn to the undercover videos that anti-abortion activists have released in the last couple of weeks. Here's what two Planned Parenthood officials said in these undercover videos about altering abortions in order to be able to retrieve fetal tissue. Here it is.
We've been very good at getting parts on liver because we know that so I'm not going to crush that part. I'm going to basically crush below, I'm going to crush above, and I'm going to see if I can get it intact.
I'll mention this to Ian in terms of how he feels about using a less crunchy technique to get more whole specimens.
Ms. Fiorina, less crunchy technique, crushing above and below specific organs to be used for fetal research. What's wrong with that?
Oh my gosh. By the way, this has nothing to do with whether you're pro-choice or pro-life. This has to do with the moral foundation of our nation. If a woman was sitting outside of Planned Parenthood in, for example, her OBGYN's office looking at this ultrasound at precisely the same point in her pregnancy, her doctor would be saying to her, look at your baby. Look at its heartbeat. Look at its fingers and toes. This is an abomination that Planned Parenthood has lobbied against a woman's opportunity to look at an ultrasound before she makes an incredibly difficult choice to end the unborn life within her, and yet they are using that same technology to harvest body parts, which they claim are not a life, in order to sell them to save another life. It is unbelievably hypocritical, and I frankly find it astounding that anyone can defend it.
Well,
I'm not a big fan of Carly Fiorina, and she like totally messed up the answer to that question. Even from her point of view, she didn't like go into the possibility that they were altering, you know, that's against the law to alter procedure in order to get donated tissue that doesn't, you know, because you're only supposed to worry about the health of the pregnant patient. You're not supposed to worry about your, you know, ulterior issues with donations and, you know, what some medical researcher may want in terms of tissue. And I want to show this final clip on the Planned Parenthood scandal or whatever you think it is. It looks like it's actually hurting Planned Parenthood's image anyway. And this is the person they had on Fox News Sunday to defend Planned Parenthood was just sort of a Democratic political operative, like I said, from Emily's List. And they confronted her with this law that says you can't alter procedures, and she wasn't really prepared to answer it, although she did have a pretty good answer about the benefits of this fetal tissue research. And I'll talk about that a little more if you watch that clip here.
Well, Ms. McIntosh, let me ask you about one specific aspect of this, because the law on this is clear, and let's put it up on the screen. No alteration of the timing, method, or procedures used to terminate the pregnancy was made solely for the purposes of obtaining the tissue. That is the law. But here's what one of the Planned Parenthood officials says.
If our usual technique is suction at 10 to 12 weeks, and we switch to using an iPass or something with less suction in order to increase the odds that will come out as an intact specimen, then we're kind of violating the protocol that says to the patient, we're not doing anything different in our care of you.
But then Ms. McIntosh, that same woman, says that she's going to ask the surgeon at this Planned Parenthood facility about violating the protocol about switching procedures in order to get better parts. I mean, isn't that a direct violation of the federal law?
I mean, after hours of talking to this staffer, in this dishonestly edited video, they got her to say that she would talk to a doctor. That's not an admission of a crime. Listening to this language is ugly and uncomfortable, and I completely understand that. The whole concept of organ donation is a really difficult thing to think about. But the families that benefit from this life-saving medical research are immensely grateful for the kindness that patients do when they donate these things. We're talking about people with loved ones with Alzheimer's, with Parkinson's. This exact kind of tissue donation was used to make the rabies vaccine, the chickenpox vaccine, the polio vaccine. This directly relates to Americans' health. This is life-saving medical research.
Let me bring in.
So that answer from Jess McIntosh actually sounded somewhat similar to the one you heard from Cecile Richards on ABC earlier. Makes me think that somebody handed them out the same talking points before they went on the Sunday shows. Maybe not, but I wish they'd actually had a more technical medical explanation, kind of like what I was talking about earlier that I got from my OBGYN consult. But I guess the downside of going into that further explanation is that the whole thing is kind of gross. I don't know, maybe I'm a little desensitized to that. I grew up with a pediatric surgeon for a father, and my brother's a doctor, and of course I'm married to an OBGYN, so I'm used to people, over dinner eating salad and talking about things that other people would kind of think is gross to talk about while you're eating dinner. So maybe I'm not as shocked as everybody else is about these secret Planned Parenthood videos, because that's the really shocking aspect, is that these officials are speaking in such a callous way about these procedures, drinking wine and eating salad. I think Rand Paul in a couple, kept saying they were eating brie. Was it Rand Paul? And in a clip I didn't show, Carly Fiorina talked about how they were drinking wine and drinking salad, but nobody drank salad that I saw. That would be a real scandal if they were drinking salad. That would be unnatural. But before I end the show, I want to move on to one more topic. So ISIS and the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, which is what ISIS stands for. Some people call it the Islamic State, and it really is supposed to be this caliphate in the Levant area, which includes Iraq, Syria, and parts of Lebanon, and may even extend into parts of Turkey, because there was a terrorist attack in Turkey that was blamed on ISIS, and Turkey has responded by actually getting much more involved in this war, which they'd been kind of ambivalent on, because, the Kurds are fighting ISIS and the Turks are also against the Kurds. And I want to show a couple clips on that. First, I want to show a report from Alex Marquardt, who covers the Kurdish aspect and basically all the stuff that's going on. Alex Marquardt on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking about the new developments with Turkey in the war on ISIS here.
Good morning, George. Turkey has long been accused of not doing enough in this fight against ISIS, of standing by while fighters and weapons cross their long border into Syria. But now Turkey has suddenly and dramatically stepped up its role in a way that could have big consequences for both ISIS and itself. For the first time, waves of airstrikes by Turkish jets pounding ISIS positions in northern Syria. And Turkey, a NATO ally, now also agreeing to let the U.S. use an airbase in the south to launch drones and fighter jets against ISIS, bringing American pilots far closer to their targets. Turkey jumping into the ISIS fight just days after a suicide bombing in southern Turkey blamed on ISIS that left over 30 dead.
This is probably more than the U.S. ever expected to gain. We were only asking for basing rights, but now we're getting basing rights, and we're getting the Turkish Air Force contributing to the attacking of ISIS within Syria.
Now, Turkey is hoping to push ISIS back from its 560-mile-long border with Syria. But they're also targeting the Kurds, longtime enemies who Turkey has now started bombing in northern Iraq. A dicey situation for the U.S. because the forces Turkey is hitting are allied with fellow Kurds supported by the Pentagon and fighting against ISIS. So what the U.S. has gained in air support could potentially hurt on the ground. And more Turkish strikes are expected as the U.S. looks to ramp up its efforts from Turkey. But the big question is this the game changer that U.S. officials are hoping for?
So that's kind of a weird situation where Turkey is attacking both ISIS and the Kurds because the Kurds have been the most effective fighters against ISIS, as I've shown covering this over many months. And what could make up for the loss of Kurdish fighters against ISIS is the fact that Turkey has like a 400,000 person army that could totally wipe out ISIS if they decided to go across the border into Iraq and Syria with their ground troops. But so far it's just been airstrikes. And but the way that Turkey's gotten really angry at ISIS, I guess, or has ramped up its airstrikes against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, that's a significant development. The last clip I want to show on the ISIS threat doesn't have to do with any of that. It actually has to do with the way the threat of ISIS against the U.S. homeland, against domestic terrorism, is being continually covered on various shows. This is Pierre Thomas bringing it up as part of his interview with U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch, and this is the report I wanted to criticize more. In fact, I've noticed that Pierre Thomas, among others, several journalists really play up this threat of domestic terrorism that doesn't really seem to be based on any specific credible threats, just the social media presence of ISIS and other groups. This is actually, I guess, newsworthy in that Loretta Lynch says that ISIS is a bigger threat than Al-Qaeda, but the rest of it seems almost like, Scary Pierre on, the threat of terrorism, or I didn't like Scary Pierre. Maybe down in the comment section you can let me know a better name for Pierre Thomas's scary reports on terrorism. This is on the threat of ISIS for the final clip, almost 3 minutes long for the show tonight here.
Attorney General Loretta Lynch.
It's as serious, if not more serious, a threat than Al-Qaeda.
Loretta Lynch, the nation's new Attorney General, is talking about ISIS, the threat that's front and center, staring her in the face as she arrives at the Justice Department every morning. This day, it's 7:15. The threat from ISIS now a clear and present danger.
Do you agree with some of the assessments from people in Congress that this is the most dangerous high-tempo threat environment since 9/11?
It is a dangerous high-tempo threat environment. And I think the fact that it is still new to us and we are still trying to determine really the scope of it does make it very, very dangerous.
Lynch suggested ISIS is a group rewriting the book on terror tactics, using an unprecedented social media campaign, urging young followers worldwide and here at home to kill.
They've got over 20,000 English language Twitter followers. ISIS focuses on getting individuals to commit acts of violence in their name, which they will then take credit for. This is a different model from other terrorist groups.
Often no funding, no training, just do it. And there's evidence the ISIS plan is working. More than 70 Americans charged in recent years with supporting ISIS, some accused of plotting to blow up pressure cooker bombs and of planning to murder soldiers and college students en masse.
Does that make the threat more imminent?
I think that it makes it harder to predict. I think it makes it harder to determine who is going to succumb to the propaganda.
And there's a new ISIS threat, at times making them invisible.
As people get drawn more and more into the rhetoric, they move off of platforms into which we have visibility, into encrypted platforms into which we don't have visibility. That's the going dark problem.
And Lynch warned that ISIS may employ a new tool in the future.
ISIS might develop the capacity to do a cyber attack?
Concerned that ISIS or any of our foreign enemies might develop that capacity. That is the thing that keeps me and many of my colleagues in law enforcement up at night.
And she admitted that the FBI may not be able to detect every lone wolf, ISIS or otherwise. Case in point, the Chattanooga shooter who killed 5 military personnel.
I think that the fact that he was not on law enforcement's radar illustrates the concern that we have of individuals who are outside the mainstream, yet tap into these strands of thought or schools of thought that lead them to violence.
Each hour, every day, the Attorney General at the heart of an epic fight with lives literally hanging in the balance.
George Lynch and other top officials are coming to grips with the fact that they're dealing with something new. A terrorist organization effectively using Western tactics to reach angry, unstable millennials.
Ooh, angry, unstable millennials. That does sound threatening, but you can let me know down in the comment section if you think that it's a real threat or it's a trumped up threat, or if you want to go back to the original topic of the show, you can tell me whether you think Trump is a real threat or a trumped up threat, or I don't know, that's kind of a silly pun, but I need to finish the show. I wanted to try to keep it at like a 2-hour limit, and I'm at the 2-hour mark at this point, so I appreciate the nearly 200 of you who showed up to watch this as a live show, and I will preserve your comments and put them on my Patreon page as I do every week. And I appreciate my 50 patrons who support the show. I've had a lot of problems with YouTube monetization, so if you click up in the corner of the video with your mouse, you'll see a little eye that you can either give me monthly support as a patron or one-time support if you qualify for the somewhat erratic YouTube fan funding program. Otherwise, hopefully I'll have a chance to make some other kind of video this week. This last week I was gone at a overnight thing for part of the week and didn't get a chance to make any other videos. Hopefully that will change this week, and next Sunday you should see me at 6:30 p.m. Pacific or thereabouts to give you my take on the corporate news media's shows on what's important in the politics and news and foreign policy. And I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out for you this week, and until next week, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.